Hello and welcome to a championship Monday morning live edition of Football and Grits. Brody, you know
We
how we
made
know
it.
this is live is Ghana and South Korea, just finished. And according to my 23andMe results, Brody, I am 12% Ghanaian. So
What? This is
we're
your
hyped.
moment, man.
We're hyped in this house right now.
Let's go.
Anyway,
Youngest team in the tourney. Look at you having a moment.
yeah. Anyway, I believe the manager just got a red card of some kind. Anyway, Brody, this is not football, and well, it is football. Anyway, let's get to it, Brody. I was on the couch Saturday.
Yeah.
I had LSU A&M on a second screen. I was watching it, but I was a little more focused on USC Notre Dame. You were in the house, Brody. What the heck happened? What?
Yeah.
What?
You know, it's such a hard game to pinpoint. And I think I'll start with the fact that Brian Kelly, you've listened to a lot of Brian Kelly press conferences. Normally in a post game, he's like, all right, here's exactly what went wrong. I'm going to break it down for you. He's really good in press conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the same boat I'm in, which is just kind of like what was going on. And it was like he said multiple times, I couldn't really put my finger on what happened here because it's not like LSU lost in some way that's highlighting an issue or exposing something. You know what I mean? Exposing a certain area, I should say. LSU's defense has been fantastic. And against the worst offense in the SEC, just got embarrassed. From start to finish, first drive, A&M just pounded the ball, ran it, and just destroyed them. And that was the case throughout the game. And then that set up receivers open. And some of it was, Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad made some just unreal one-on-one catches. Not much you can do about that. That's A&M finally kind of playing to its talent. But
good thing he wasn't wearing sleeves.
Yeah. Yes, he was not wearing sleeves. Good call. But it was bizarre. And I think what Kelly's talked about the last 2 days was, one, he just didn't there was a certain fire and all that just didn't seem to really be there. And obviously that leaves you wondering if it's a look ahead thing. I don't know, maybe. But also and he talked a lot yesterday about, this team. And I think this is where it gets interesting. This team got where they are because of traits over talent was the way he put it. His description is they played the right way. They did the right things. They were smart about everything and didn't rely on their talent. And it felt like Saturday they were kind of relying on their talent a little. But there's another element to this, which is, and it's like a two-sided thing for me that I'm struggling with. None of us ever thought LSU was a great team. We thought this was, and that is why it was impressive. That's why we've talked about this week after week. This is a pretty good team that just kept figuring it out and winning games despite being above average or good, and that's why you were so excited about the Kelly era. That is why, the next 10 years, you're like, man, you might really get this rolling. So none of us ever were like, LSU really can win the playoff. No, I don't think so. But so this loss was always in the cards the same way they probably should have lost to Auburn and the same way they probably should have lost to Arkansas. This is just a reversion to the mean in reality. It is. I think that's fair. This was probably a 9-3 football team, and it stings just because you lost to a team that you are so clearly should be better than. And it stings because it just sucks the life out of a playoff hope, sucks the life out of this entire SEC title game, but not sucks the life out of. We're going to talk about it a lot, but spin zone. But there is something weird of as much as I'm saying it's a reversion to the mean, I don't know if I should also overreact to it in terms of this game because it all felt the things that went bad were out of character. It was, They didn't finish drives. That's the one thing LSU's really good at is finishing drives offensively, or they didn't, the run game stuff was bizarre. They just could not keep up with Devin Achane, which credit to Devin Achane. He played an absolutely dominant football game, but it was just all of it felt weird. So yeah, I think LSU showed you who they were to some extent and maybe a little bit of look ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at I think you put it that way is I don't know that it's an exposure of sorts. I think you look at, when Alabama has really struggled this year, the Texas game, the Texas A&M game, they don't have that offensive explosiveness. This is who they are. They've struggled. When Tennessee lost to South Carolina, why'd they lose? Well, their secondary has really not been good all year. Their front seven has been better than people realize. But the secondary has not been very good. And what happened? They got torched in the secondary. It was sort of exposing this thing that we all kind of knew was there. The LSU thing was just so hard to understand. But I think regression to the mean is probably about right. But that aggressively against an A&M team that has just looked lifeless for the whole second half of the season. But you're just like A&M is a grind to watch. Like they are not fun. They don't have any guys that make you say wow. They they refuse to let Achane get the ball as much as he should. 38 carries, by the way.
Yeah.
38 carries.
He was
215 yards. Moose Muhammad, a great game from him. The one-handed catch made my catch of the year of the week on our best and worst of the SEC.
And then he made another amazing one that wasn't like as flashy, but amazing one like a drive later. The best part of the one-handed catch, by the way, was like he just stopped. He didn't like it was so badass.
I don't understand just from a body perspective how you get a ball thrown that way. And then your body just says, "I'm not going to jump. I'm just going to get." Like he didn't jump at all.
That's like a Reggie Miller. Like, what's the whole thing? The presence of mind, just to be like,
yes,
no. Jumping's not the move here. Like, how?
I think most receivers' instincts would be to go through the DB, jump, give a mossing attempt. But credit to Connor Wegman, who maybe the lone bright spot of this season, in that if you're A&M, you feel like you got your guy. Now the task for A&M, we'll get to them later. But you want to put your entire coaching staff between your roster and the portal and say, whoa, guys, let's talk about this. Because I have to assume that's going to be the main task. We'll get to the Aggies later. But there is a game to be played on Saturday. And, of course, as is the case every year, Brody, the only conference championship games with real playoff relevance are the Pac-12 and the Big 12. I'm getting a little tired of this.
Yeah.
But
so sick of it.
So Georgia is in. I mean, I think Georgia could lose by 40 and probably still get in.
Yes.
What's the line? If they
lose, it's like 16.
No. I mean the line for them to get kicked out of the playoff. If they lose 110-3, does Georgia still get into?
Yeah, everyone would have to get hurt or something. So like, you don't even have the confidence that they figured out. It would have to be horrific.
So Georgia is pretty much in, and I think this is a good test case, Brody, for in the BCS era. Georgia would have to take care of business in this game. But I think people forget and just how teams work. Winning your conference means a lot.
Yes.
When people put goals, and these are very real things when you're talking about inside the program. When you look at the cynical media perspective or the fan perspective, they might say, oh, winning the SEC is great, whatever, but I care about the playoff. But for most teams, they talk about, hey, we want to get to a bowl. We want to win our division. We want to win the league. And then whatever happens next, that happens next. You win the league, even if you're coming off a national championship, that's a very real goal. So I think that means something. And I don't think you're going to have motivation issues for Georgia. I think you're going to get a focused Georgia team. I don't know that we got a focused Georgia team on Saturday against Georgia Tech. I can't blame them. That was a bit of a sleepy game. So, it is what it is. But, it's one of those situations where, this game will still mean something to the players on the roster.
Absolutely. I mean,
Tim Gordon here. I guess I didn't think about this. Tim Gordon, Georgia fan, pops in and says, as a Georgia fan, the fact that we have not won the SEC since 2017 makes me sad. And I very much want to avenge 2019 and 2020. I forgot that in 2019 they lost. I was watching that game in a cheesecake factory in Atlanta, actually, because I was trying to get back home from a recruiting story project. And I was in Atlanta during the SEC championship, but I was not at the game. And then I was at last year's game, obviously. I didn't think about it.
Was 2018 they lose like the really good Fromm Hurts game?
I believe so.
Because
Tua
got hurt, right? Then Hurts won it. And then 19 they get just boat raced by LSU. 20 they don't make it, I assume. Yeah, they did not. And then 20, then 21 you just get upset by Bama. Yeah, wow. All right, great point, Tim Gordon. Yeah.
19 they were the better team in that game. They were winning a lot. So So I hadn't thought about that fact of it, actually. We should have had.
And Kirby said he's like, it's an opportunity to do something that is very rare. Like at the end of the day, like that is a really good point by you that like it's so easy for us in this big picture brain to just be like, this doesn't matter. And it's like the opt-out thing. Yeah, there's gonna be a few opt-outs every year, like of course. But like most of these guys like football and they only have a few years of like playing it, and this is like their life, the same way we live in, like you live in, a fan live and dies with Mississippi State Auburn or something. Like you live and die with this stuff. Like you're not just brushing it off. And also, Kirby Smart's very good at motivation, all that stuff. I can't imagine that's going to be an issue. And I think what's tricky about it is everyone assumed Georgia was going to win this game convincingly anyway. But at least there was like a life to it. It was 1v5. It was, LSU's fighting for the playoff, which just had some intrigue to it. And now it's like, okay, now LSU won. It's like, whoa, this proves LSU isn't that good. Maybe so. 2, it just, there's the meaningless of it. But it's tricky because if you view it the same way we just viewed, this game doesn't really like that loss didn't like expose anything for LSU. It's the same team. I don't think the spread should change or anything like that. It's the same thing. It's the same recipe for how you would theoretically win. And I'm standing here as somebody, and we're not going to give away our picks, but as somebody who probably thinks Georgia dominates this game, there is routes. Like there is a clear way you win because the same way we've seen Georgia just falter this year. Like Georgia, I think Georgia's number 1. I think I've been saying repeatedly on the show, like I am going to judge them more by how they play when they have to try. And they have been a juggernaut when they try. But that doesn't erase the other part of it that, we're at 5 times now. We're against a much worse team. They are just on the ropes like in the second half. So there is clearly the recipe, right?
Georgia's been in such a weird spot all season because last year, I mean, how many times did you watch them and you just said, like, wow, like this team is unreal. And every time it felt like you were watching them, you were just wowed by everything that they did. Granted, that did include the SEC championship. I was saying wow for another reason. But that team brought this year, the Tennessee game, the Oregon game, I would say probably the rally late against Florida when they just turned it on. They've had some wow moments, but this Georgia team, like they just don't jump off the page to you as like, oh man, this team is unbelievable. I think they're definitely the best team in the country.
Yeah.
So like,
and I think that's also probably why people struggle to embrace them as the best team because there's no like one thing that you're like, that's it, but continue.
But they're, really offensively efficient and explosive. Is it fair to suggest maybe that last year almost the Stetson JT Daniels conversation almost made them like more interesting?
Ooh.
Whereas like this year you're just riding with Stetson and he's played really well. He's done everything you need to. He's played really well. But like last year, people were kind of like, well, can they win it with, they've got this defense, but can they win it without the 5-star? Even though anyone actually watching that team, myself included, felt like, yes, Stetson is good enough to help them win it. He might even be better than JT Daniels, which I would say, based on what we've seen in 2021, it's hard to really gauge because they're in very different situations, but Stetson's played really, really well. JT Daniels has had some good moments at West Virginia, but, at the end of the day, he's not playing right now. So it is what it is.
And I wonder if also, do you think there's something to, first off, everything you said, I think is why they're like harder to wrap your brain around. Like, but I think there's also something of there's not a face to this Georgia team as much as there was last year. There's not like the name brand stars aren't there. So one, I think everything you're saying, there was just an intrigue about that team because on top of everything we're saying, it was also the Clemson thing of like, can Georgia finally just do it? Like, can they finally?
Yeah, that's true.
They've proven for so long they couldn't. But 2 is like, even though we're talking about like Stetson Bennett's your quarterback, but still it was like Zamir White and James Cook and like I've never seen a defense in my life where more people knew like more than 4 players like nationally. Like everyone knew every defender. That's rare. And this team is just good at everything. Jalen Carter, for nerds, know like that's the best player in college football, but
he doesn't jump out in the same way that Jordan Davis did last year.
Yes, because he's just really good at his job, but it's not like, oh my God. And
or Nakobe Dean chasing down ball carriers from like 40 yards away.
Nakobe Dean's probably the best example. Like everyone.
They don't have that guy. Like they have some, like obviously, Smile London's played well. They're missing.
They got Smith, we all know they got studs, but it's just there's a certain name brandness to it that's just not there, and I think it's just people are just struggling to wrap their brain around it. But it's like, guys, they are the best team. Like they don't have a. Do you think they have a flaw, like football wise? Not the kind of sleepwalk thing, but like I don't know it.
I mean, listen, I talked like, when I did that Coaches Confidential piece. They really did not like the corners. And those corners showed up big against Tennessee, so maybe they're wrong. But they really said like there was a lot of questioning Keely Ringo, and then there was a lot of like beyond him, they're not that deep.
Yeah.
LSU has obviously, when you talk about Malik Neighbors and Keishon Boutte, like they can got some guys that can make some plays, but those guys are not burners. So
No, I agree.
So can you take advantage of that? We'll find out maybe. So I wouldn't call it a weakness. I think this is the problem with the entire conversation around Georgia.
Ooh.
Is that any conversation around Georgia doesn't compare them to the other teams that are playing football in 2022. All the conversation around Georgia generally compares them to Georgia 2021. And I think then I think Georgia, like that conversation almost like makes them feel like disrespected in the discourse sometimes because it's like, this Georgia team, like last year's team was probably a little more fun. I think there is something to the fact that there was that storyline all year of like 1980 and Georgia, clearly the best team in the country. Can they get there? And then they get smacked by Bama. And then it's like, well, they're still going to get the playoff, they might have to play Bama again. And they do play Bama again. And then that's a very interesting rematch in this perspective. And then, of course, they do it. So that was a pretty interesting title run for a lot of different reasons. So I think you remove the storyline aspect of it, you remove the sort of star power of it, and you're just left with this Georgia team that's the best team in the country, but just not as interesting and not as compelling for the casual fan, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know what to make of them. Like, again, I can't say enough. I think I'll listen to arguments for Michigan over Georgia. I think you can make a case. I think we're going to probably find out which of those teams is better. I would probably go Georgia. Just because I think they can do a lot more things. We'll see, and they're more tested too. Michigan, the schedule, we haven't seen them.
Yeah,
I might be as underwhelmed with a top 10 team, I'll rephrase this. Penn State might be the most underwhelming top 10 team I've ever seen in my life. Like, you watch them and you're like, okay, like their record is there, and like
it depends if you watch them more closely by the Ohio State game or the Michigan game, right?
Yeah, because it's like just like
the Ohio State game. I'm like, wait, that is an amazing team, but every other game, I'm like, what's impressive?
Yeah, like I can't make the case against Penn State as a top 10 team, except for having watched them, where you're just like, ugh, I don't want to see this team. So it's like, so basically, outside of beating Ohio State, Michigan's entire resume is built around that Penn State game. And we haven't really seen them get tested as much as we've seen Georgia get tested by some better teams. So,
by the way, you really came at our producer John Hayes' alma mater, Penn State, there. But but Tim, first off, has a lot. He points out, I think, any shortcomings that Georgia has are overcome with depth. So, like, you can take advantage of something early, but we can outlast anyone. I think that's a good point. Yeah. But Tim also asked, Tim's on a heater today, I'm curious if you know the answer to this. Mm-hmm. In 30 years of SEC championships, how many times do you think Georgia has won the SEC? And I'm trying to think, did Murray win one?
No, because he came really close that one time, and they
the short pass,
the short pass, like a yard short. I'm gonna say once.
I'll say twice. I'll just assume they had to at least win like one or two others.
I'm sure Tim will provide us with the trivia answer.
Well, I'm looking it up as I had it up. Okay, I think I see 3. It looks like they won in 02 and 05. Okay. But that is wild. Okay, thank you, Tim.
So first SEC championship in 16 years, despite this insane run that Georgia's been on, where they've clearly been, along with Bama and Ohio State, like the class of the entire sport. It's amazing.
God, that's unreal. So, okay, then let's ask ourselves, what is the path for LSU to win? Like, what actually is it? And I know some of it's just the sleepwalkiness, but
I think you have to have good Jaden Daniels show up for starters, which he took the night off in Aggie Land, I guess. I don't know if good Jaden Daniels was left behind in Baton Rouge. I didn't see that same decisiveness. I didn't see that same accuracy. I saw those eyes drop a little bit quicker than you'd want. I saw the legs start churning, not real comfortable in the pocket. I didn't like what I saw from him.
So he played. I think he played fine. Like, LSU moved the ball all game. It was it was just one of those games where they got inside the 50, like 9 out of 10 drives, and just didn't really finish well. But continue.
So I think you got to have that decisiveness and accuracy, like we saw against Alabama with the legs mixed in, of of course. You need to have a heavy dose of the quarterback run game to just make your numbers better. If they've got a linebacker that has to account for Jane Daniels on every single play, that opens things up down the field.
Yeah.
It's just a pure numbers game. And then, of course, I think you need Neighbors, Boutte to make some really good plays. Certainly, you need to establish the run, which is good luck. I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. I think they can move the ball through the air some. You have to run it a little bit to keep them honest, I guess, but we'll see. And then I think you just limit the big plays, and then 3's not 7. That's your thing. Your red zone efficiency defensively. If you can do all of those things, and then you can win the turnover battle by 1 or 2, you're in the game late. And I think that's the best you can do against this Georgia team. If you do all those things, you're in the game late. Maybe you need to stop, or you're down 3 and you get the ball with 3 minutes left on your own 30.
Yeah, it's like I think the overall the quick answer is the defense just has to make this a low scoring ugly game. Like that's the overly simplistic way to look at it. Like which is reasonable. It's totally possible. And as much as I very much think people underrate the Georgia offense because it's not sexy, because it's not some cool scheme, because there's not superstars, like this is a really, really good Georgia offense that runs the ball efficiently. And I think you saw in the Tennessee game, like they can attack you downfield. They can get you those play action situations and get wide open. Todd Monken's just a really, again, not some like sexy scheme, but Todd Monken's just a good play caller who knows how to get the best out of guys. So yes, I think it's underrated, but still like there's not some one thing where you're like, you can't beat that. Everything in a vacuum, LSU on the right night, again, prefacing all this, can match up with like LSU's D-line almost every night except A&M. LSU's D-line should be up there with anyone. Like almost like A&M, I don't know what happened. The LSU D-line just got whooped. But most nights they match up and win that or hold their own. They can do that. The corners have been so much better than I expected this year. Harold Perkins obviously is just a game changer. See how creatively you used him. But the linebackers as a whole have been pretty good. And the thing I'm really interested by, and I don't think anyone can match up with Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington. Like there is no matchup for that. But maybe LSU is up there with teams who might have like a chance at that, just in terms of one, Harold Perkins was probably put on this earth to like try to hang with those guys. He's obviously big enough and he's
got as good a chance as about anybody, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think he's there in pass coverage to be some star, but he could. And also LSU has this weird secondary that none of us think it's a great secondary, but they're veteran and it's a lot of safety corner hybrids. Like they change corners and say, like they literally have 3 different players who have both started games at corner and safety this year. Jay Ward's played both throughout his whole career. Greg Brooks from Arkansas has played both all year. Even Jared Bernard-Converse has played some safety this year. They got Sage Ryan, the former 5-star, is another. Like, I think that they're not going to win, but they're guys who are obviously good in coverage, but are physical. And I think that gives them at least a chance there. So there is a route that, like there's a possibility of holding the 17 or something like that. That's not out of the question. Hard, but possible. And the other thing you said is, I think your only chance on offense is Jaden Daniels just making stuff happen. Like he, that's what he does, right? And now you're a little worried about that because he has a bad ankle now. He took a bad hit on that 2-point conversion in the fourth quarter, and he went to the tent, came back out, and led a really impressive drive to the red zone and almost threw a touchdown to make it a game. But you could see he was limping. He was in a boot yesterday. He's gonna play, like obviously, but maybe that you need like your only chance is him just making stuff happen and. Him not being 100% that ankle against the most athletic defense you will face is concerning. So that's where you have to worry. Because I don't, as much as I think LSU's receivers are the second best unit in the SEC, I actually think that. I don't think you're just winning one-on-ones against Georgia. I don't think Malik Neighbors and Kayshon Boutte are just manhandling them or burning them or anything like that. Like, I think that gets neutralized. LSU's run game is pretty solid. I don't think you win that. So it's just Jane Daniels, and that's hard, especially because the QB spy thing you said, like, yes, we'll open things up, but is there a team probably better at QB spying than Georgia? You wouldn't think so. Just the bodies they have. So,
Well, Brody, we got to talk about Auburn. We got to
do it.
This is getting out of hands. So to catch you up, if you haven't been tracking it, a lot of Lane Kiffin noise. Lane Kiffin throughout the week, he tells his team Well, after the fact, he said he told his team he was not going to go and he was going to announce things after the game to put the emphasis on them, which I would say is a strategic backfire, but whatever. I would say coming out and saying something as soon as you know it is probably better because that sort of puts the focus back on your team. Anyway, it doesn't matter. After the game, he was pressed pretty hard in the post-game press conference about Auburn. He said, I'm not leaving. And there's a well-worn skepticism, I would say, of when coaches say that, of like, okay. The funniest example, last year, Lincoln Riley saying, guys, I'm not going to be the head coach at LSU after
That was so
Bedlam.
good in hindsight. Oh my
That's
God.
the funniest one. Like the most legendary one, obviously, the old Pine Box Trail, U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville. You're gonna have to drag me out of here, both in a pine box.
Yes.
Nick Saban straight up denying he was going to Alabama before he went to Alabama. These are
I think the best denial I've ever seen, though, even though it ended up being accurate, was Mike Tomlin about LSU last year. Do you remember that? He basically was just like, I'd be an idiot. Like, I've never seen somebody just be like, that'd be the dumbest move I ever made in my life. Why would I go that? I'm just like, wow, tip of the cap to you, sir.
Yeah. So I think, me personally, after the game, I was texting with some friends, and I was like, I think I believe Lane. That was a pretty convincing denial. Anyway,
yeah, at the end
he is staying. I don't believe he signed his extension with Ole Miss just yet. I could be wrong on that, but he is staying. So that is huge for Ole Miss, obviously. Is Lane Kiffin staying at Ole Miss for a long time? I don't know. My thought was, coming into this, okay, if you're Lane Kiffin, you've done some amazing things at Ole Miss. People are going to come after you. Can you win a national championship at Ole Miss? History says no. Does Lane Kiffin want to win a national championship? I feel like probably. We'll see. So the question is, okay, you've probably got one step up. Do you want to make that step at Auburn?
Yeah, you have to.
And I would say, Auburn is kind of up and down, and obviously you have the booster element. If I'm waiting for my one big move and I'm at Ole Miss where I have some capital built up and people love me there, I don't know that I'm taking that next step to Auburn.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of coaches have done some really good things at Auburn. But Gus Malzahn did some big things at Auburn. He beat Alabama, and he's on the hot seat for like 6 straight years. I don't know that I want to necessarily live that life. And also go coach in the same state as Nick Saban. I don't know that that's what I want to do as my next big job. So I've thought since they fired, since the start of the year, Lane Kiffin was obviously, I've said, if I'm Auburn, I'm going full court press on Lane Kiffin. If I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm staying away. That's just what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
So now we have the Hugh Freeze conversation.
Well, wait, I want to jump in. First off, just SC Scout guy, we are going to get to South Carolina.
Yeah, we'll get to South Carolina.
Genuinely are. But the only thing is, I actually think you're right that he made the right decision probably not chasing that job because, I think you just, especially with the SEC expanding, like I think Ole Miss and Auburn aren't that drastic of jobs. The only reason I always thought he would is because he's like open. Like I remember at media days, he's made like blatant comments about how there's a limitation to recruiting at Ole Miss and how like you're not going to get the best recruiting classes at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. And like it was almost transparent that he's like frustrated that he isn't at a job that's going to get you the best talent to win a title. And I wondered if the NIL stuff and all that, like
their collective had gotten off to a slow start.
Yes.
That was something that we were hearing a lot over the summer, is that he was very frustrated with that. And that was a big reason why they did so much work in the portal because transfers were a lot cheaper than high school kids.
Ooh, I don't think I knew that.
Yes. The market for transfers is much, much lower than it is for
which is
for high school kids.
I would love to have that discussion in another pod because that's fascinating.
It's a matter of time and upside, basically.
Yeah, it's the future draft picks thing are always going to be more valuable than a guy drafted 5 minutes ago. It's
that's pretty much accurate.
So that's why I thought he would. But I think you are right that like if I'm a person here, like I would rather be at the place that I already have the capital. That, by the way, winning 9 games kind of makes me a hero. But clearly he wants to win a title. Like clearly he is not happy living the 9-3, 8-4 life. Like I don't think that's for him, but for my brain, I'm like that's better. But yeah, I think he can wait for the perfect opportunity. And you're right. So, but then that leads us to our next development.
By the way, whenever Nick Saban decides to call it quits.
There's no way, right? I thought that's probably what he's thinking, But there's no way. It's such a want to be a slap in the face to Nick. Like,
would
you
it
know, just
though?
no, not like I don't think this, but like I feel like I don't think Nick Saban's always been the biggest Lane Kiffin fan. And like, I don't know. It's like, hey, you built all of this with just pure responsibility and structure. We're gonna hire Lane Kiffin. I feel like people won't respond well to that. And like,
Maybe,
and I
but
feel like
wins talk.
Nick's in the Coach K zone of like, he doesn't get to pick his successor, but you better kind of listen to him.
Yeah, and then SEC, I got mentions Dabo. Dabo is always the name that's come up. I thought back in the day, well, a few years ago, that Dabo wouldn't leave. Now with the restructuring,
Ooh,
that'd be interesting. Dare I say the shine's come off Dabo a little bit.
oh yes, I'm going to get to that in the South Carolina thing.
Yeah. Anyway, so now you have the Hugh Freeze conversation where on the field you don't have a lot of questions about Hugh Freeze. Off the field, certainly plenty of questions. There's I think for a lot of people, it's less about the NCAA stuff and the escort service stuff and a lot about, contacting sexual assault victims that have sued the university. I think that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I think people are tired of the NCAA, but very much more in tune with survivors of sexual assault and not having and doing right by them. And so he leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. It's just true. And so you're seeing, obviously he was getting to the front row of this conversation. There has been some blowback. Right now, it seems like we're figuring out whether or not that blowback is going to be enough to have that not happen. I'll say this. Auburn just lived the life where not everybody was on board with the coach that they just hired. Do you want to get back into that again? Whether or not, whatever you think about Hugh Freeze, the reality is if you hire him, there's going to be a sect, however large, of the population of Auburn fans that are, this is not my guy.
Definitely.
You just live that. It is important that you
and
have
probably live that all the Malzahn era too.
Yes. Yeah. You need that guy. And
that's why Lane would have worked because they would have been so gung-ho behind him.
Mm-hmm. So you got to find that guy. Can you get a guy out of left field? I think yes. I think one thing that I've been kicking around writing these days is with the conference realignment. Well, we call it realignment. I say consolidation. I think one thing that fans in the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 are going to have to get used to is that your jobs are now stepping stone jobs. The Big 10 and the SEC can pay more. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if you're Auburn now, can you go sniffing around some coaches that nobody talks about anymore?
Like, all right, you got it.
Is there a Lincoln Riley out there? Is there a Brian Kelly out there?
Do you have any up your sleeve? Come on, you got some.
I don't, but I'm saying that's something that I would consider. And I would say, hey, come sell a coach on, hey, look where the sport is going. In 5 years, the job that you have now is not going to be the job that you have now. Come here to Auburn. We can give you you can recruit the top 10, top 5 level here. We've seen that happen. Yes, we have some alignment issues, but you can win here. And you're about to not be able to win there because your school is about to be hurt by the winds of change. And that, I think, is a compelling selling point.
And because, again, and I think Dennis Dodd even just reported, like, they don't even have a plan C, really. Obviously, I doubt they literally don't, but, like, I think it was pretty much Lane or Freeze. And if hypothetically neither happen, it's like, who is option 3 or plan C? Because I don't know. And I'm trying to, like, just spitball completely irresponsibly, so don't anyone take this as, like, but, like, okay, because I'm trying to think of, like, who would the coaches be that would just make sense? And I think, by the way, there's a lot of smart hires you can make that aren't sexy and might not fit what Auburn wants. Like, Kane Womack is at South Alabama and, like, would not be sexy and definitely has a lot to prove still. But I think
quick Kane Womack side.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him just taking LEO from Indiana? Fair?
Has he done that? I followed South Alabama closely. I've not caught on the
He's
LEO.
Been tweeting out #LEO. And I saw it the other day and I was like,
you know what? Who am I to say people shouldn't love each other? You know, like, that would be a bad take. So more love, the better.
It felt distasteful to me that I was like, it's kind of Indiana's thing. Can you? I don't know.
I think it works. If it was like Kalen DeBoer doing that maybe would be like a little different. I think Kane's like literally Tom Allen's guy, like since he
Yeah,
was a
that's fair.
GA at Ole Miss, so it
I
might
hope he
work.
has
But I
permission.
didn't
That's
know
what
that. That
I
is fascinating. But yeah, like Dave Aranda would never in a million years be in the mess at Auburn. There's no world. Like I'm just trying to think of like who the example would be of what you're presenting. Like,
well, that's what ADs and search firms do. You have to ask around, and you have to say, "Hey, who this pitch work on? Who
oh
is a little
wait,
bit?"
Kevin Wise just said would they hire Shane Beamer? Oh no. You can't take away our best story, but honestly,
Yeah.
that's not a bad move. I'm just saying it.
Well, Shane Beer, by the way, late breaking news from Pete Thamel. Looks like he's about to lose his OC, Marcus Satterfield. So
To whom?
to Nebraska, following that rule.
Ooh, okay.
Satterfield, that's the one that's going to be complicated for the fan base because the most popular guy at every campus is always the backup quarterback, and the least popular guy is usually the coordinator of the unit that people are the angriest about.
Yeah.
Tom Harlow said they love him in Columbia today, Tom. We need to go back and search Marcus Satterfield in like October. Let's see how that was going.
Yes.
It was not going great. It was not going last. So yeah, I think the players and staff love him. The fans were a little bit perturbed a bit. So yeah, that one, you never want to replace coordinators, but we'll see. So where does Auburn go? That's where I'd go. I'd say, hey, listen, we're Auburn. We have a good job. I do think Auburn is a good job. It is a job with some flaws. You don't have to panic. You don't have to make some rushed hire. It's November 28th. You still have, 2-3 weeks to early signing day, which does matter. But just, hey, let's hit reset and let's cast a wide net. We had our guys. Maybe those aren't going to work out. Obviously, Lane is not Hugh Freeze. We'll see.
And John Cohen has proven he's like outside the box might be dramatic, but he doesn't fall into. I mean, you look at his Mississippi State hires. It was like, even though Joe Moorhead didn't work out, still I think everyone thought that was a great hire in the moment. But that was not. I was at the Clarion Ledger at the time. I remember our list of who the obvious candidates were, and Joe Moorhead was not one of them. And that looked like a home run. That was out of nowhere. Mike Leach obviously shocked most of us, and that has worked. By the way, they're 8-4 this year. Baseball. I know not everyone follows college baseball that closely, but Chris Lemonis at Indiana was not an obvious hire, and he won them a College World Series. So, I think John Cohen's he's not a reactionary hire. So, I trust him to probably go for someone we're not thinking of, which is to your point.
So that's the thing. I think maybe we're too close to it, and Auburn has a lot of red flags in the job. But at the end of the day, Auburn has a lot to sell. Also, It's a very good job. You can win big there.
I want to ask you this, okay, I think we all probably thought before the last 3 years of chaos, Auburn was probably a top 10 job, 8, 9, 10 in zone. And
in the sport?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
In the 10 to 12?
No, I don't think so. I had it I think the Auburn and the Tennessee job are very similar. We ranked the jobs in the SEC.
I know. I remember we did.
With Ari. And then Ari made everybody mad because he ranked Auburn last.
Yes, well, that's what I wanted to get to. It's because I don't remember where Auburn gets skewed, but either way, I think Auburn's always been considered a very, very, very.
It's a really good job. It's probably the
I think because the alignment stuff is so real. The alignment stuff is real, and you need to be cautious. But it's become such a thing that I think it's the reversion of the perception has gone 10% too far.
That's probably true.
That is a thing. But it takes you from I don't know, let's say 14th to 18th. I don't think it takes you from 14th to 50th. It's still a really good job. Sorry.
So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I will say that. All right, Brody. So. Let's get to South Carolina because I've been beating this drum all year. Not so much about South Carolina, but on the Shane Beamer perturbedness, I guess. People complaining about Shane. Listen, the guy has got his team obviously still invested. He's kept some receipts, and now you're cashing in. The Tennessee win. I think we were talking about it on this show. I don't think we were calling them a one-hit wonder necessarily, but I did not believe in them going into the Clemson game, and they fall behind 14-0. And sure enough, they rally back. They win that game against a Clemson team that I do think was kind of underrated somehow coming into that game. There is nothing you can say about those 2 losses, but wow, that's really impressive. That is really impressive. And I wrote about it this morning at The Athletic. I led my best and worst of the SEC with South Carolina out here. Shane Beamer keeping receipts on Jesse Palmer and the rest of the college football ecosystem of shrugging off his team. And I just think it's really interesting, the incremental stuff that we've seen from them, because they took the really bad loss to A&M the last year, and then they just whoop up on Florida. They whoop up on Auburn. Yep. And then people are starting off, well, those teams didn't really matter. And then North Carolina didn't want to be at the bowl game because they started in the top 10. I said, okay. And then this year, they had the ugly loss to Florida, and they bounced back, destroy Tennessee, go beat Clemson on Clemson's home field. That is really, really impressive. And props to Shane Beamer in South Carolina, who was calling out, I think Marty Smith tweeted, do you remember when somebody asked him if his team had quit early in the season? It was a radio guy in South Carolina. And Shane just tweeted, I do. He was not happy. So SC Scout guy says the only people that I see say people are complaining about Shane Beamer's media from outside of South Carolina. That's because we pay attention to other people from outside of South Carolina. Shane Beamer really annoys. He really annoys a lot of SEC fans. Yes. And I said it's stupid because he annoys them because he is enthusiastic and enjoys it when his team does good things.
It's like I think there's a portion of people who think he's a PJ Fleck when he's not
he's not at all.
He's not a PJ Fleck. Yeah.
No, he doesn't. Again, he doesn't have a binder full of a language that he wants his program to speak. I think he treats people really well. I think you hear that from every stop that he's been. I mean, there's a reason why people around Oklahoma and the Lincoln Rally Tree still revere Shane, the players that he played for.
Yep.
What did you see Saturday night? I covered Oklahoma for one season in 2009. Oh gosh. But I've covered the Big 12 for a long time. So I follow a lot of people around Big 12 country and a lot of Oklahoma players. What did you see Saturday night? Happy for Shane Beamer. For Shane Beamer. You don't see that everywhere.
That's not as common as people would think.
You don't see that everywhere. And I think it's because, again, he treats people well. He seems very genuine, and people like him. There's a lot of coaches that every coach goes places and you move up and you move around and you do all those things. And the truth usually comes out when you leave. And not a lot of people leave a program and still have people at that other program love them.
Very well
and
put.
Congratulate them publicly and root for them.
Yeah.
Dare I say it's more often the opposite.
Yep. No, I think that's a really good point. And it's as much as we love Lane Kiffin for saying the quiet part out loud, maybe we love Shane Beamer for enjoying the quiet part out loud. I don't know. That's not the right way to phrase that, but hey, I don't have to act cooler than I am. This is awesome.
Yes.
I'm going to enjoy this. And I think there's something to
it's
that.
Fun. And I think he appreciates I think the opportunity that he has.
Yes.
And SC South guy in the comments says the same thing that I saw, is that his players love him and they won't quit. They've had a lot of reason to quit. I didn't think they did, but they took a couple rough losses early in the season. They got down to South Carolina. Yep. Nobody gave them a chance against Tennessee. And here they are. This is a team that was sitting at 5 wins, and you're looking there at Tennessee and Clemson, 2 teams that are in the playoff hunt. What were the Vegas odds that they'd be a 7-win team here sitting here at the end of the season? Not very good. No. You could probably finance the GDP of a small country and qualify for the World Cup if you had bet $100 on them to beat Tennessee and Clemson. So props to him on that.
And last week, I believe I asked you the question of okay, wait, let's step back. What can they be? This is a cool story, and so was it last year, but what can they be in the pecking order of the SEC? And I started thinking, and I'm not there yet. Don't hold this against me, but it's just, I wonder. And I think I said last week, the thing with him was you knew he'd be able to recruit and run a program. You didn't know if he'd be able to get the on-field going, and he's getting it going fast. So it's holy crap, what is he going to do now that he's proven that? But I started looking back at the Spurrier years at South Carolina and comparing it to Clemson at that time, because and I'm SC Scout guy, and you both might correct me here, but I went through all the recruiting rankings, and it's in that 09 to 13 zone when South Carolina was obviously on its heater, their classes were generally in that like 15 to 20 zone most years. Clemson had like the one like Stephon Anthony like really loaded year, but other than that, it was mainly like 15, 20. There were similar zones, and Spurrier was such a good coach that he could clearly own Clemson, all that stuff. And right around 14, obviously Clemson's recruiting went up a notch. You get Deshaun Watson, you get all these guys, and that's it. To be honest, that coincides with Spurrier stepping down, and that's I think he stepped down in 15, right? And it's like that's when that rivalry shifted. Dabo could take over, and the recruiting rankings just changed. And I just wonder now that we are in this zone of one, Clemson shine is where Clemson's still the best program. Like they are still a top 5 program. But the shine's wearing off. And there is some cracks, and maybe to your point about the consolidation, does like their stock drop a little because they're in the ACC, and does Dabo in the NIL era, does that hurt them? All this stuff. They're still a really good job, but is there an opening for like Shane Beamer to narrow the margin in that rivalry? Because when I say the rivalry, I mean the recruiting element. Like I mean that like they're recruiting from a lot of the same base. Let's be honest, South Carolina, but even the states around it. And like, can you? I mean, South Carolina's a top 20 class right now. It looks really deep and nice, and they're probably going to get more. And it's like, I don't think South Carolina's ever going to have a top 5 class like Clemson can have. But can you narrow that? And if you can narrow that recruiting gap, maybe South Carolina can actually become a real player in the East. Like that's not crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it part of it matters with how competent everyone else is. Like Kentucky seems like they're right up against their ceiling. We'll see what Mark Stoops is doing. By the way, Auburn.
Ooh, we might be there.
Anyway,
we forgot about that. Yeah.
Anyway, but they seem like they're up against their ceiling a little bit. Tennessee is getting their act together, but if all of the chips fall in place for South Carolina, can you be the second best program in the East? That seems possible. You have to do it, but you're going to have a hard time convincing me that's not possible. Okay. Yeah. Georgia, just quite frankly, they seem like they're in place for like a 10, 15 year, like they're going to be there.
I am ready to say they're going to be Bama. Yeah.
Like because you have Kirby Smart who, yeah, he's going to have to replace coordinators at some point. He's going to have to do a lot of things. But at the end of the day, he's obsessed with recruiting. And to quote our good friend Ari Wasserman again, stars matter. It's the most important thing. This is a talent acquisition business. I don't know how many times I have to say that. That's what college football is. Can you get dudes? And that is what Kirby Smart does. You got to do some other stuff. You know, Texas A&M is learning that lesson this year. But if you can get dudes, that's the hardest part. So Georgia's going to – I mean, Georgia, if this run of – not necessarily being in the best team in the country every single year, but where they're top 5 in the mix, you know, almost every year for the next decade. If that doesn't happen, I'll be surprised. And I don't know what the road to that is. You know, just stay off of motorcycles, Kirby. That's all I have to say. My Petrino story last week. So
yes, great work on that. Everyone should go read it.
Thank you. And also you should go read on the Clemson discussion, Grace Rayner wrote a column about the need for a reset because, again, the program is – and by the way, not to get down too far down the chute, but Clemson, I think, is a matter of when, not if, they're in the SEC. I think it will be a while with the ACC's
so that might
rights. But if we're talking 30 years, 15 years, I'm going to take that bet. So anyway, you know but the point that I think we're going to is even if the divisions go away ultimately – you can still be for South Carolina in that second class. I think it's going to be hard for you to ever get to that Alabama, that Georgia level. You know, where Tennessee and Florida were in the 90s. I don't know that I ever see that for South Carolina. They just in their history.
You're chasing the Spurrier years. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's a huge. You would take 11 wins any day.
Yeah,
I would.
Can you win double digits once a cycle and never dip below 6 or 7? I think that's possible.
I think that's the exact right way to view it. Yep, I think that's
when you're peaking, can you be in that mix and beat Bama? Yeah, probably. You probably can. So props to South Carolina. I think ultimately you have a very invested program. You have a top 15 class right now. You've got as much juice as anybody in the country. Well, in the country, I say probably in the conference other than Georgia. Going into the offseason now, you've got to parlay that on the recruiting trail. What you did on Saturday probably carries over more to 2024, but it can help you get a jump on where you're at. So, you know, you can't ask for a better situation. Also, Brody, we got to touch on the Bama playoff stuff. I am the ESPN FPI graphic got people fired up that had Bama at 14% to make the playoff, USC at 12%. That's fantasy. I've never understood ESPN's FPI. They don't seem to really ever explain it. It seems all the numbers just seem made up and like divergent from reality. I don't understand how they calculate any of these things.
I am never a guy who just rips on things, and I'm just like, that's the dumbest one I've ever seen. Like all of their polls, I'm just like, it's so wrong. But yes,
well, it's like that. It's like it doesn't ever like. So you look at these numbers, okay, and they don't seem to reflect the current reality, and they're not predictive. So what service?
Yes.
What do they? What are they showing us?
And it's frustrating because they also employ
idea.
the best predictive metric probably in the sport of SP plus, and it's like they just refuse to use it. It's fine.
So whatever. But ultimately, the scenario seems like Georgia. It doesn't matter what happens. TCU, we'll see. I think they're still in if they lose. I would not bet my life on it.
Okay, so that's going to be tough. It's going to be a thing, man.
Regardless, Michigan. Because first of all, I don't think Michigan can lose to Purdue, but they're
yes, Michigan and Georgia are no matter what. TCU might be.
So we will see what the committee does, and we will see how the committee treats Ohio State's loss. A lot of people seem resigned to the fact that Ohio State will only drop to 5, and that they'll stay above Alabama and Tennessee.
And I think they probably should, but I'm not convinced they will.
That's the question. I don't know. And this is where it's going to get complicated, because if you look at all three of those teams, okay, Ohio State's a 1-loss team. Bama and Tennessee both have 2 losses. Tennessee has the best wins, I think, out of that group, but they have a terrible loss to South Carolina, and then they got punked by Georgia, which whatever.
Yeah, the unfortunate truth is Tennessee's just not getting in. Like, there's not even a scenario.
Yes.
You will not be in Alabama.
Alabama does not really have the wins.
Nope.
Like, their best wins are Mississippi State and Texas, which is like, I
believe so, yeah.
Okay. But then you look at their losses, and it's like, okay, they've had some very close wins, but they've also lost to LSU on the last play, to Tennessee on the last play on the road. So it's like, okay. And then you look at Ohio State, and the case for Ohio State is pretty much that they have 1 loss. And is that going to be enough? I don't know. So I think it's going to be Ohio State.
I think so too.
I think that's
mainly
true.
Just because, and it's so fun that it's these two teams, because it's like one, we've literally seen the committee like Bama more than Ohio State multiple times in these scenarios in very dramatic ways. But also at the same time, the committee has proven very much, like the last few years, especially in like the Day era, like to the point of like the advanced metrics, they love Ohio State. Even when we've the last 2 years been like, they got weaknesses, they still look at the per play and the SP, not literally SP plus, but stuff like it, and just be like, they are like, because those metrics always think Ohio State is the best team. They almost always think that. So I think there's no way it's Bama, but it's real, man. And I hope you're right that TCU's in no matter what, but they have not liked TCU. Like they have been reluctant to put them where they are. And if TCU and USC both lose, which we both know is very possible, not likely, but possible.
Yes. Kansas State, very good. Utah already beat USC once, so
we'll deeply hope I'm wrong, but I'm not convinced that Ohio State and Bama don't get in there, because they love Ohio State so much and they don't respect TCU.
We'll see.
I hope I'm wrong, because we both are not high on Alabama. We both think they are just flawed, and their losses aren't even that jarringly great, and their wins are definitely not great, and they've been in like 6. But then Andy pointed out very well on the show with Ari that but you also could argue that they lost 2 games by 1 play, and it's like, that's a decent argument that they're like actually better. But they're not a top 4 team. They are just not, and that's even on top of the conversation about earned, because I don't think they've earned it, but even more than that, they're just not a top 4 team.
Yeah. I'm very intrigued. The committee has to show their cards, because what we're going to see on Tuesday night is 5, 6, 7 in order. None of those teams are playing on Saturday. So the only way that you in theory would move it is if something happened at the bottom, an upset in the conference games, and a team that you played that's not in the top 25 this week moves into the top 25 and gives you a top 25 win. That's the only way that those could be reshuffled. But the committee, for the most part, has to show their cards. So that order we see on Tuesday night is probably going to be the order that they're in line, sitting there rooting against all these teams in the conference championship Saturday. But the committee has got to be rooting hard for those teams because it's very clean if none of those teams lose. And even if TCU loses, they can still pretty easily put TCU in there.
I do got to say, our
deserve it.
SC Scout guy does point out, and I say this because we are an SEC show, maybe we should say Southern Cal and not USC because we are an SEC show and we need to respect our
Fair enough. But yes, it's going to be I'm fascinated to see how this shakes out.
I really am.
Tuesday night show. The committee hasn't. Maybe it's because they hadn't been a G5 team that we can yell at them about every week. Because if you do the mock selection, you can see the numbers. You can see how the G5 gets undervalued every single year. And then, ironically, as our colleague Chris Vanini pointed out earlier this year, now that there's no playoff team, it seems like the G5 is getting like a lot of respect. Like UCF loses and they dropped like 2 spots or something like that.
Yeah,
like the G5 is getting the most respect they've ever gotten in a year where they have no one that's even close to the playoff conversation. So I don't know what to make of that. But either way, we're going to see what's going on. Brody, coaching carousel starting to heat up.
Yes.
My eyes are on the Aggies. I think you have to have a coaching overhaul. Jimbo Fisher said some concerning things after the game. Sam Kahn wrote about this in his lead takeaway from Aggie Land on Saturday night. Jimbo Fisher basically saying there's nothing wrong with what we're doing.
And he was like in defensive mode, man. And I
just don't know how you can watch that team for 12 games and come away with that takeaway. That's insane.
Here's the real problem with what happened after that game Saturday night. It's not that he even said that, even though we should talk about that. It's the way that he came into that. So like he came into that frustrated. Like he went to that press conference in a defensive zone of "See, I told you," which that's one thing to believe that. But what that's really telling you is everything he had been saying the previous weeks about like maybe we got to do some stuff. That was a lie. And he deep down always felt this way. And the second they won, by the way, to go 5-7, so you should not be feeling vindicated. The second they won, he was like, no, see, this is the truth. And that is why you have to be really worried, because it means he never wanted to do it. It means that deep down, he doesn't believe it's wrong. And by the way, I don't think there is not zero truth to the notion that, this was a young team. And this was like kind of the first night that a lot of those young offensive weapons just like showed out and showed what they can be. Like you're not wrong there, but that would be a good argument if you went 7-5. Being historically bad as they are, and we've been over this, we don't need to do it again, but like that argument doesn't work. There's something wrong here, and I don't think he's changing. He's gonna make a hire, he's gonna they have a plan, like they're gonna do much stuff, but at the end of the day, nothing's really changing. He's still gonna run that offense. The second something goes bad, he's still gonna pull the trigger. This is concerning for A&M.
So I'm just going to go down the list of where we think the changes are coming from. On the good end, Tennessee, if Alex Golish wants to go somewhere, he's going to have some opportunities. That's kind of up to him. Mississippi State, I think they're going to have to fend off some people for Zach Arnett.
Yes.
Fantastic coordinator, runs that 3-3-5 that really gives programs trouble. They may have to pay up to keep him. Great stuff there. On the bad end, on the good end.
Also, I throw out Matt House, LSU's DC. I think he's somebody that NFL teams might call. He just came from the Chiefs, and he left UK being DC because I think he didn't love the college life. So I wouldn't be shocked if he went NFL if called, but that's another.
South Carolina's on the search for an OC now with no Marcus Satterfield. On the bad end, Brody.
Yes.
Kentucky's offensive staff. Certainly, I would suggest a change seems likely at offensive line. Rich Scangarello, we'll see what happens there. I would bet probably that there are some changes coming there, whatever that looks like. We can call it whatever we want to call it. Bill O'Brien at Alabama. I think that marriage is probably coming to an end.
Hey, go find another job. Don't fire him, but
I think that one is going to an end.
Oh man, forgot that's going to be a huge domino though. Like that's gonna send a lot of things.
It will. Arkansas in the Kendall Briles situation, I think there's a lot of frustration there. I don't think you're going to see a change there with Sam Pittman. I think
I don't think you should.
I don't think you should either. I don't think you can do better, and I think you can point to, hey, KJ was hurt, and that's when the offense really ground to a halt. Now, is that a problem with quarterback development and your recruiting? Maybe. Malik Hornsby has kind of been all over the map. Fortin has been. I think he's a walk on. Came from.
Yeah. He's like in a 6th year by now. Yeah.
Yes. So you have some. I think Arkansas probably in the portal this year looking for a quarterback. But that's kind of, I think those are the things that stand out to me. I think we're going to have some curveballs.
Of course. And then,
outside of Auburn, I don't think you're going to see anybody get fired out of nowhere. But could somebody get hired away out of nowhere? I'm not going to rule that out. I think last year really showed us, I think Ross Dellinger always says it best. Consider everything, believe nothing.
Very good advice.
It's like 100% true. So
Monken,
really
I don't think there's an obvious job anymore because most of them have been filled. But like Todd Monken at Georgia OC will always be a good candidate. That'd be another good one to watch.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I think he was a head coach once.
He was good at it.
Southern Miss, and then we'll see. I don't know what to make of him. I think being the OC at a place like Georgia, where you have all these toys and you're making $2.5 million, you don't have to answer any of the tough questions when things don't go right for you.
Yeah,
it seems like a decent gig, I feel like. But
true. And the fact that he left being like a rising star head coach, to be an NFL OC, that's not that common. Like that probably gives you a little insight to your exact point of like,
so
what
it depends on when you get those jobs where you are an OC at Clemson or an Ohio State, or it's really about what do you want out of your career? Do you want to go run a program? Some guys do. Some guys are kind of like, I like this. And maybe that changes over time. What you want.
I think Kevin Wilson will be an OC for the rest of his life at Ohio State. Like, he's happy.
Kevin Wilson. I remember covering Kevin Wilson at Oklahoma like 10 years ago. Good grief, I'm old.
When you dropped the 09, I just wanted to hurt your feelings real quick before we roll out. You mentioned 09, you were covering Oklahoma. Do you want to know where I was?
No, I don't.
I was graduating middle school, my guy. I'm just going to end on that note.
Let's go. That's rough. That rough.
Like broke my brain. I don't feel like we have that much of an age difference. So that really got me.
Oh, that is rough. So anyway, well, Brody, we want to get out of here, but we can do some quick work here. Yeah. 2 things. Our pick of the week. I think we're both taking Georgia -16. This is not a reaction to last week. This is me saying, when the bell rings for Georgia, they show up. And I think they're going to be real fired up and motivated for this game. I think you're going to see peak Georgia. I don't think it says anything about LSU. I think you're going to get a Georgia flex this weekend. I think they're angry about what happened last year. And I think this team, I'm now a believer that this is not so much a Georgia team with flaws as much as a national champion that gets bored when they go play at Mizzou. I think that's what happens. And they aren't your preparation is not what it needs to be. They're going to be on point this week.
I'm with you.
And then Brody, in honor, I think you're on the same pick. What's your reasoning?
Oh yeah, no, I won't even try to add any more insight. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
And before we get out of here, Brody, we did want to hit on our best Atlanta meals, as many of our listeners and ourselves, which we need to do a show post Saturday night because I will be on a plane very early Sunday morning, so I am leaving. So we should we got to figure out something. We got to talk to producer John about what we're gonna do. But the two best meals I will point at in Atlanta. I went to Superica a few years ago. I think there's multiple locations now. It's unbelievable chef-driven Mexican food.
It's very good.
And then Nantai, which is more expensive than it should be, but probably the best Thai food I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
They have like a full tree of I don't think dim sum is Thai. I don't know what they call it. It's just a bunch of
probably cousins of it. Yeah,
something like that.
Same tree.
It's like a tree. It's like $30. It's too expensive, but it's delicious. I think I had the pad Thai there. It's very, very good.
Let's go Friday.
We'll have to see. Maybe those are the 2 best meals that I've had in Atlanta. Brody, best meal you've had in Atlanta.
I think the best meal I've had in Atlanta is, and I went there out of laziness, White Oak, right in downtown. I went honestly out of laziness, and I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, they'd won all these cocktail awards, and like, oh, let's go, and it was fantastic. I got a sorghum braid. a sorghum braised short rib that boggled my
Okay.
mind. I had multiple blackberry sage old fashions, which like I'm not like one of those guys who's like, give me the fruity version of this drink, but it just like brought it out so much. It was top 5 cocktails I've ever consumed. Like it was perfection.
Interesting.
So White Oak, it's in downtown, so like it'd be easy to go to. I was really happy with that. Yeah. And then but Superica is on there. Superica is great.
Yeah. And then I'm a big Korean barbecue guy, Brody.
Mhm.
Just a bunch of elite Korean barbecue all over the place.
Yes.
I believe Iron Age is a chain, but I've been there a handful of times. Very big fan of that. There's one in
Right.
like Duluth on the edge of town. So Atlanta, a great Korean barbecue town. So that's where I would lean. But
Have you been to
Brody, we got to
Amalfi,
get out of
the
here.
pizza place?
We got to
Okay,
let
we
you
did.
go
Okay.
talk to Mr. Bryant. Well, no, you're not. No Monday presser today, or is there?
No, there's a Monday presser.
All right.
I got it.
LSU season marches on. So anyway, thank you guys for listening. Both Brody and I will be in Atlanta this weekend, watching the ACC championship, and then I'm gonna be in Charlotte and Vegas, and it's gonna be a week. So I'm already tired of thinking about it. So anyway, thank you guys for listening. We'll figure out what we're gonna do this weekend, Brody. We gotta talk to John.
Yes,
so,
we will.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you again at some point after the ACC championship game. Thanks.